My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours. We're a music podcast that chats to artists, musicians and creatives on their songwriting craft and upcoming projects. I'm your host Simon Fink and welcome to episode 282. The incredible Georgia Mooney joins us on the pod today in celebration of her debut solo record, Full of Moon. The ARIA award-winning songwriter, who some of you might know from her work in All Our Exes Live in Texas, well, she's put her all into this brand new record and it definitely shows. It is such a beautiful and unique listen. The sonics are incredible. It is definitely worth your time when you have a chance to check it out. As always, we'll get some housekeeping out of the way. Please make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you find good podcasts on and ensure you're following us across all of our social media channels. This week, we've returned with a brand new YouTube video where we've gone record shopping with the one and only Greta Ray. So please head over to our YouTube channel to watch and subscribe after you've finished listening to this episode. Details for all of our socials can be found within the show notes of today's episode. Our guest today is Georgia Mooney. The songwriter, host, podcaster and multi-instrumentalist is a woman of many talents. As one quarter of ARIA award-winning folk pop group All Our Exes Live in Texas, Georgia has toured the world many times over and played with artists varying from Nathaniel Rateliff to Midnight Oil and even the Backstreet Boys. Today she's stepping out on her own with Full of Moon, which is her first solo record. It has Georgia striking such a rich and interesting sonic landscape, with the record moving from sounds like eccentric 80s pop to more folk-style affairs and baroque-sounding alternative music. It is a wild ride, but it is one that Georgia should be extremely proud of. In today's episode, we're talking to Georgia Mooney about this brand new record and how it's influenced by artists such as ABBA and Kate Bush. We discuss what it's like to step out on her own and how the songwriting process differed under her solo project. We also quiz Georgia on whether we'll see any new episodes of her marvelous podcast, which is aptly titled Simply Marvelous, and what fans can expect from some upcoming shows of hers this year. Now, Full of Moon is out now, and we've left links within the show notes on where you can buy the record and see Georgia live. We also want to say a massive thank you to Liz from Super Duper for her help with today's episode. Here is our conversation with Georgia Mooney.
Do me a favor and hide all the sweets away. I've got no control. Give me a word, there's still time to go.
Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Georgia Mooney. Hello, Georgia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you going?
I'm pretty good. I just got back from doing an aqua aerobics class with the local Lewisham grandmas, so that was fun. That's been mostly my whole day. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in the pool for the whole day, but that's been the highlight of the day.
It's not a bad.
How's your day going?
It's been an all right day. Thank you. Thank you very much for asking.
Good.
I feel very lucky to be talking to you today. I know that there's plenty going on. The aqua aerobics aside, there is plenty going on in your life at the moment. And so I'm very appreciative that we get to have a chat with you. You're releasing a brand new record today called Full of Moon. Firstly, congrats on this record.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It is exciting. It feels like it's been a while coming.
Well, I'm very curious to jump into the record and also have a little bit of a discussion, I guess, in terms of, for those who are listening who maybe are not aware of some of your previous work, you are one quarter of the incredible band All Our Exes Live in Texas. But this is your first solo outing. So I'm curious how you're feeling in relation to, release day with a band compared to as a solo artist.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a very different thing. I think there's beautiful things about both, obviously. One thing that's really nice about being part of a band is that you kind of share all of the experiences. So you sharing the stress of it as well, and you kind of just have someone to bounce everything off. Whereas doing things solo, even though I've got full creative control, which feels like a real luxury after being one of four for so long, it is also, you're suddenly kind of, faced with full responsibility of every decision and full kind of responsibility of all of the stress and anxiety that comes with releasing a record. But it's really nice. And I have been working on this kind of in the background during a lot of years with Exes, and so it feels like, and then having it kind of be prolonged by the pandemic again, it feels like it's been in the works for ages, and so it's a big, it's a big moment.
Of course. Well, and I imagine as it should be, and I'm very lucky that we actually get to have a chat with you in relation to this moment. Do you remember when you first started, not writing music, but when you first kind of had the idea for a solo record for yourself, and when you kind of thought maybe this isn't for the band, maybe this is more for me?
I think I have always had it in the back of my mind. I mean, when I first started performing as a musician, that was kind of, like around 10 years ago, just before the band started. I was doing a little bit of solo stuff, and I had a couple of EPs, but I never made an album. But I've always wanted to and been, dreaming it up. And then the Exes thing kind of happened by accident. It was a friend's idea that we get together, and then we thought we'd just do one show until we picked a really stupid band name. And then it turned out that kept going, and kind of then, 8 years later, we're like, oh, okay, this is a serious thing, and we should have thought more about the band name. But it served us well. It's always been in the back of my mind. But I think as my tastes have changed, and it's probably morphed in lots of ways in how I imagined it might sound. And I learned so much with performing with Exes. I learned a lot about songwriting from the other girls and from collaborating with them. And I learned a lot about performing. And you kind of, I think as a musician or even as a vocalist, I think you sort of assume that the sound that comes out of your mouth is the sound that you're stuck with. Or it's a weird thing to say, but I've learned that it takes a long time to find your sound. And I know that's a sort of a wanky thing that people bang on about, but you can also transform it a lot. And so, I guess this was a gradual process of making lots of demos and writing loads and loads of songs, many of which didn't, make the cut, and kind of finding a sound and a kind of production style that felt truest to me, and then, taking time to chip away and really get it right. And that's one thing that, this process of recording was about 18 months, so which is longer than it should be. But that one nice thing about that is that we really got to sculpt it over a long period of time. And I suppose with a debut album, you have a feeling, you can only do your first album once. And so you want to kind of, I wanted to get that right so that I was coming out of the gates feeling really strong and feeling like it was unique to me and quite different to the previous stuff that I've been doing. I think that's a rambling answer, but I don't know if any of it was helpful, but you know what I mean?
Well, no, I don't feel that it was a ramble, and it did make quite a bit of sense. And I feel like just adding on a little bit, as you said, people's tastes and their interests evolve, and in songwriting as well, I feel like every few years there is a new you, if that makes sense. Like that it kind of, it's not a strange thing to say. And I feel that this record, Full of Moon, is so sonically striking. I feel like I will, when we're lucky enough to have guests on, we'll usually put on the album and we'll take that in and usually kind of work around it and write a lot of our research or prep. I found for Full of Moon, I kind of had to just stop what I was doing and just kind of stare at my stereo while listening to this. And I mean that as a compliment. It is incredibly unique. There are touches of ABBA, there's touches of Kate Bush. There is, I want to say, and I'm getting to it's almost like baroque pop in a way.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I'd love to know how you approach that in terms of finding that sound. I know that you worked on the album and co-produced it with, I want to say, is it Noah Georgeson or Georgeson? Georgeson. I'd be very curious how you guys kind of arrived at the sound that you did, because I think it is, firstly, incredible. Definitely a brilliant headphones record for anyone listening to this podcast. Put on some good headphones. But yeah, I'd love to know how you came to the sound.
Yeah. It's sorry, I'm trying to think about it. It's hard. I think, yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying about how your sound changes every few years, and that is a nice thing, and that's a lovely thing about I think being an artist as well, and something that we should encourage in the musicians and artists that we like, is that you can evolve and you can transform, and actually, yeah, it's important to kind of not get bogged down in obsessing over making something perfect, because you can always do the next thing and that will be different, and but I think with this album, I think I always go back to artists that I love for inspiration, and I was spending a lot of time with, Kate Bush, people that you mentioned there, ABBA, Rufus Wainwright is another absolute favourite of mine, and things that I enjoy about their music and that I wanted to have in mine, and I think that I sort of can't help have anyway, I'm sort of a bit compulsive about it, is kind of quite intricate melodies and intricate chord changes, and there's a guy who plays on the record a lot, and he did all the synths, and he does lots of horns and guitars, and I would send him a song and some references and say, his name's Marcus Hamlet, he lives in Brighton, and I would say, these are some sort of ideas, let me know how you go, and come back to me. And he would sort of take sometimes 2 or 3 weeks to come back to me, because he would always say, there's just so many chords and you have to, I think it's a fun challenge when something is a bit a bit sort of musically complex. Then you have to really get into the world of it and try and find something a bit sonically interesting. And because this was made during the pandemic, when we were all locked down and the band were all based all around the world, and everything was done remotely during this kind of very lonely, miserable time, it became more and more layered, and each musician would send through some parts, and they'd sort of often send more than was necessary, and then it was Noah and my job to kind of sculpt the songs out of all the parts that we had. But we found that so many of them were wonderful that we left a lot in, and so it kind of layered up and got really, really, really lush. And for me, was definitely I love music that is quite rich and a little bit theatrical and very lush, and I always dreamed of making music that sounded like that it sounded sort of like a whole cinematic world, and it had its own sort of eccentricities, and above all things was kind of seeking beauty and romance. And I think particularly, but in the context of, how and when we made it, it became something to escape into. Literally, the making of it was something to really get lost in. And as our worlds got very restrained and restricted, this musical world we were creating kind of got more atmospheric and big and wild. And and in terms, I think, production-wise, I mean, I loved what the records that Noah's worked on. He's worked with artists like Kate LeBon and Marlon Williams and Devendra Banhart and Joanna Newsom, and so many people who have that kind of, I think, have a similar love of, beautiful but slightly strange and kind of quite intricate musicality and drama. And so I knew that I was in good hands with Noah, and we sort of shared, artists and songs that we liked. We had reference points, but I also, because all of these songs were written over many years and kind of collected between tours with Exes or, just over many years, really, in different places and different times in my life, I didn't have a cohesive kind of concept in mind for them. So it came together at the end kind of by virtue of who was playing on the album and the mood we were all in and, and the references we were inspired by.
It is an incredibly... As you've said, and one word that I think is probably the best word to use for this record is lush. It is incredibly sonically dense. I was wondering if I might be a little bit self-indulgent. I wanted to ask about one of my favourite tracks on the record. This one is maybe one of the more stripped back songs. It comes halfway through the record. It is What an Inconvenience, and I just thought that this track was just such a beautiful track. It just... I don't know what it was, to be honest. Something about it, I just kept coming back to track 5, putting that on, sitting with it. I was wondering if you just, talk us through that track and I guess where it came from.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Thank you. That one, well, the song is about... I've never really talked about this one.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? It's hard to make time for the things that keep you healthy, but being consistent with self-care is like working a muscle. And when life gets crazy, that muscle keeps you strong. Therapy is the ultimate self-care, and BetterHelp makes it easy to get started with affordable online sessions you can do from anywhere. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month.
If I'm going to spill all my secrets, but it's sort of, it's kind of about fancying someone who's married already. Hence the name, What an Inconvenience. And the complexities of that, it's sort of about a specific situation, but it's sort of about other stories too. But where things can be very innocent and yet kind of about romance from afar in a way. And so it's got a bit of a dreamy, whimsical sort of sense of longing in it. And it was also one of the kind of folkier ones on the album where I'm playing the dulcimer, and half the songs on the record I wrote and play on the dulcimer, which is a beautiful string instrument that I won in a raffle randomly, and I've become obsessed with. And I've always wanted one. Joni Mitchell used to play one, and they just have a really beautiful sound, which is kind of like a guitar, but it's a bit twangier, and it sort of rings out for longer. And you can tune it in such a way that you get really interesting kind of modes and scales happening. And it sounds beautiful when paired with acoustic guitar, and that was something that Joni often did. And so this song kind of is based on that. I've got my friend James Daly playing guitar along with me on the dulcimer, and he's doing this kind of constant moving, picking thing, which is really interesting and beautiful. And I was kind of inspired by like the relationship that Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings have, where they, they're both playing guitars, but Dave's sort of noodling all over it sort of the whole time. But it's almost like they're one instrument. They're so gelled. They're just amazing. So that was sort of maybe the musical inspiration. And then we added a few extra things like Rob Moose, who's the string arranger on the album. He put some beautiful strings that come in sort of halfway through, and when you sort of don't expect them to arrive, and then they come in, and I really like that. And then Noah plays some electric guitar in the choruses, and it's got I don't know, I like that one. It feels sort of the most like a poem or something, that song. It's kind of this verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. There's not really any bridge, except we do a little kind of noodly instrumental bit, but it's all a bit contemplative and kind of mellow and folky in a way that feels quite dear to my heart, in that kind of Joni, Gillian, a couple of my favourite gals kind of way. Yeah.
It sits in very good company. I think that track is, absolutely stunning. So
not that I'm putting it in that company. That's just they were my inspiration. That's all.
Not at all. I'm more than happy to, my opinion is putting it in that company. I know that you were just referencing, but I'll gladly place that there.
Oh, thanks.
I was wondering, Georgia, whether you could share with us your first introduction to songwriting, or like what originally got you into making music and lyric writing.
Oh, well, my mum is very into music, and she probably was responsible for introducing me to a lot of the musicians that I love. You know, people like ABBA and Joni and all the sort of folk artists of the 60s and 70s, and then a lot of fun bands in the 80s. And we used to dance around in the kitchen every night when she would make dinner, and she also introduced me to musicals and, things like The Sound of Music. And I was very into music from a young age. And I can't really remember the moment where I decided I wanted to be a songwriter, but it was early on. But at the same time, I was always very shy during school. So I knew that I would have to overcome some hurdles. And I had no idea how to write a song. I remember for a long time thinking that if I just sat at the piano, then I would sort of be like inhabited by some sort of spirit, and then my fingers would just move and find the notes, and it just sort of would happen in that way. I really thought that as a teenager, like probably too old. I just thought there's some sort of magic spell would be cast. Anyway, but it turns out you have to really think about it and practice for ages. And since my teens, I wanted to write songs, and I probably was inspired by artists. At school, I really loved people like Sarah Blasco and Claire Bowditch, like local Australian singer-songwriters who were really popular at the time, and who I suppose saw myself a bit in them and who they were and where they lived and where they came from and all of that. And then I went off to jazz school after school and studied in Perth, and that's where I learnt sort of, how to put a song together and learnt about the theory of music. And even though I have a very complex relationship with, the idea of a conservatorium of music, and I did 4 years and did drop out before the end of my degree, I still am really grateful for having learnt all of those things that I learnt there. And I think that my yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to learning. The mechanics of it all in as much as you can before you kind of go and have a bash. Yeah,
it's funny. A fellow uni jazz school dropout, and also a number of people that we've. And then there's a few people that we've had on this podcast, ranging from like young US indie rock musicians to R&B people from the UK or whatever. And it's funny that there seems to be a high percentage of us that
don't make it to the end.
We've learned what we've wanted to learn, and then we've gone, you know what, maybe not for me. But it is. It's still a learning experience. You're still taking pieces of information that you want to apply to your own project away, which is the most important part. Yeah,
definitely. And there's probably something to be said for, having enough sort of sense of rebellion or to want to leave before you get sick of it. I think I started to see that it was very competitive, and there was a sense of you had to be a certain way, otherwise you were no good. And there were a lot of people who were graduating with very little self-esteem, and I was like, I don't want to get to the end of this and not be brave enough to try and do my own thing. So I'm gonna get out quick before I drown. But yeah, and you do learn a lot by having the opportunity to study it every day, which is pretty crazy and a privilege.
Yes, 100%. I think it's almost like a rock and roll thing. I feel like people are like, you know what, pushing back. If I submit to it too much, it's not rock enough, whatever it may be. But anyway.
No, totally.
I would love to know, by the time this episode does come out, there are going to be some live shows announced, which is very exciting. You've got some shows in Sydney and Melbourne in support of the record. How are you feeling about finally being able to play some of these songs in front of people?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've got a wonderful band. There's going to be 6 of us on stage, and they're some of my favourite musicians, and I'm really excited about playing these songs live. And yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. I mean, it's a bit of a task because when you make something remotely and you've layered it up and layered it up and layered it up, we didn't think about how to perform it live when we were making it. It's become like, okay, right now, how do we do this after the fact? But that's been a fun challenge. And yeah, there's nothing, playing live for me is the most fun part. And I love the band, and I can't wait.
That's super exciting. I know it's always a little bit of an unfair question to ask someone or an artist their favourite song on a record, so I don't want to do that. But as you said, you do have an incredible task in terms of bringing these incredible songs and arrangements and everything else to life. Do you have a track, maybe one more so than any others, that you're looking forward to debuting live, or that you think is going to pay off in terms of not the biggest arrangement, what's the word I'm looking for, in the way it's being converted, that you're looking forward to the most, I guess?
It's hard to say. I think my favourite song at the moment is probably War Romance, which is the first song on the album, and it was the first single we released. It feels kind of like the most dramatic and theatrical, and there's something fun about doing that sort of a song live, because you really get to put it all out there and have a big sing, and that's just a really fun one to sing. And but then at the same time, it's also really lovely. Like the last song on the album is called Soothe You, and I will do that one just with my piano player, the 2 of us, and that feels really special too, to do something really stripped back. And I'm excited about it all. It's all so new and fresh, and having a new band, we're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's going to be fun. Hopefully people come along.
People will be there. Don't you dare say that. I know people will be there for a fact.
Hope so.
I do have to ask, I feel like it would be rude not to, from one podcaster to another. I know it has been a little while between episodes, but can we expect a return of Simply Marvelous?
Simply Marvelous. Yes, that's a... Thank you for asking.
Of course.
That was a very fun podcast project that I did with my comedian friends Reese Nicholson and Kyron Wheatley, and it started in lockdown in 2020 or 2020 when they were in Melbourne and I was in Sydney, and we kind of wanted an excuse to chat. I mean, it was right in the time where everyone was like, for God's sake, don't start a podcast with your friends. And we were like, let's start a podcast with our friends. And we would watch all of the Marvel movies and in chronological order, and then sort of have a few gin and tonics and talk about them vaguely. But it mostly would go very off topic, and we would just talk about ourselves and silly stories. And it sounds very self-indulgent, and it is. But it is also quite fun because I think those guys are very funny. And anyway, we eventually stopped because we got sick of Marvel movies because we'd watched about 40 of them. So it is going to come back, and we're talking about it a lot, but it's going to come back with a different concept. I mean, it still will be the three of us rambling on, but there'll be very little Marvel involved. So, yes, watch this space.
Look, very excited to hear that, regardless of whatever the content may be. Very excited to hear that there's an update.
Thank you.
Georgia, we would usually end our episodes asking our guests what they're currently listening to. Is there anything at the moment that's kind of on high rotation for yourself?
Oh, what am I listening? Okay, look, I'm just going to go to my Spotify and see my most recently. Let's see what springs to mind. Can I give two friend recommendations, actually?
Of course, yeah.
I am currently listening to new music from my I've frozen. From my friend Saya Vogel. She's an amazing musician who lives in Brisbane, and she writes really awesome kind of synth-centric indie pop songs, which are so great. She's got a new album out. And also a friend of mine, Lisa Caruso, who's a Sydney artist, has released an EP of really beautiful kind of, slightly indie, folky, singer-songwriter-y, but a bit electro-y, beautiful songs. So those would be two that I love right now, Lisa Caruso and Saya Vogel.
Very interesting. I'll have to check both of those out after our conversation today.
Yeah.
Georgia, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Congratulations on Full of Moon. It is out this week. We'll have all the details on where people can buy the record and see those shows in the episode show notes. But thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's lovely chatting.
Never sleep hot again with Boll & Branch's best-selling naturally cooling sheets. They feel super crisp and cool to the touch and are expertly designed for enhanced breathability so you don't overheat at night. Start getting your best night's sleep this summer with cooling sheets made with the highest quality materials. Try Boll & Branch with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. Plus, get 15% off and free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Exclusions apply. See site for details.